Moving on to the next caller. Caller, you are live on the air. Give us tell us your name, where you're calling from. Caller, you're live on the air. Go ahead.
So, first and foremost, Rabbi Tovia, I just want to thank you and William. Um, you all have are doing such a fantastic job at with the platform that you all are given, and I am honored and humbled that Hashem has blessed me with being a generation where I can learn from you both. I was raised a Christian, and because of you two, I've converted to the correct faith. So I just want to thank you, and I'm praying for you and your father, Rabbi Tovia and William. Your platform is truly incredible. I'm just honored to be on this phone call.
Thank you, brother.
Um, oh, no problem. So my question today is has to do with the Book of Acts. You know, that I believe this is one of I think three verses that truly show just how wrong Christianity is. So in Acts chapter 6 and 7, after Jesus' resurrection, the disciples asked him, Jesus, when are you restoring the kingdom of Israel? And the following verse, in verse 7, Jesus completely ignores their question and says, it is not for you to know the periods of time the Father has set by his own authority. I don't think some Christians really know just how dangerous and how big that verse is, given what we were expected with the Messiah throughout the whole Tanakh. And I would just love for Rabbi to just talk about just how monumental
Okay.
that verse is in context and everything. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And so
Ab-
just thank you.
Absolutely. Go ahead and hang up now, Antonio, for your answer. Thank you for your call. Rabbi, good
Yes,
question.
sir.
Without being aware of when the book of Acts was written, it's impossible to understand what the author is conveying in the opening chapter. So the book of Acts, unlike Paul's letters, which is written many years earlier in the 50s, unlike the Gospel of Mark, which was, probably written 70, I think probably 75, and maybe in Matthew and Luke about 10 years later. So the author of Luke, the third gospel, is also the author of the book of Acts. We don't know who wrote Luke Acts, but it's the same author. It's very obvious. But the book of Acts, conservatively, is written 85, 90. It's very late. What does this mean? So if you don't have a historical timeline, you can't possibly grasp what's happening here. Now, there are scholars, and this is becoming more in vogue, that Acts is really later, is already second century, later than what is commonly assumed to be late first century. So let's say Acts is, but let's just steelman this and say Acts is written 85, 90, which is, so what's going on in 85, 90? So think about this for a moment. When the material that would contribute to the book of Mark emerges, it was thought that everything is happening now. If we go back, for instance, to possibly the oldest book in the Christian Bible, First Thessalonians, probably written 49 or 50. So what comes across in First Thessalonians, so I'm going to the extreme, that's probably the oldest surviving Christian literature. Paul's no doubt the author of First Thessalonians, Paul thought that it was absolutely, Jesus' coming was absolutely imminent. It is happening now. That's a critical part of First Thessalonians. It's happening right now. Let's say you're in 49, you could think it's happening now because there are many people who are around when Jesus was around. But by the time you're getting to 85, 90, it's gone. It is gone. Now, if it is gone, that means how do you explain? So you have this, people are asking, like, what happened? So in Mark 9, in Mark 13, there are many of you standing here who will not taste of death until these things occur. So we can understand. So if Mark is written in 70, but when Mark is writing, incidentally, in 70, Mark contains material that's older. Mark contains older material. Mark is assembling this. So at that time, you could believe that it's happening now. There are many of you standing here who will not taste of death before these things occur, right? But imagine in the book of Acts, everyone's dead. It's another generation of Christians. You can only imagine the book of John also has to pivot on this. Like, what's happening? It never happened. And therefore, rather than the certainty of the earlier Christians that the second coming of Jesus is imminent, now you're going, we don't know. And John is going to pivot differently on this. The author of the fourth gospel is going to pivot differently, that the kingdom is really a kingdom in heaven, not a kingdom on earth. So that's what comes into view here. But the way you should view Acts 1, 6, and 7 as an example is one where this thing is going to go on for a while, which probably explains why people are writing books now. Like, why are people writing books in the 80s? Like, why are these books coming out in the 80s? Like, why weren't there Gospels in the 50s? Why? Well, the reason is in the 40s and 50s, people thought, what's the point of writing a book? The end of the world's coming, right? But now, that can't be the case any longer. Now, we're gone. In the first century, how long did people live? There were people who could live to 70, 80. There were people, but people died. You know, a lot of people died very young. I mean, ask yourself the question, if modern medicine did not exist, I'm asking you, would you be alive today? I think most of you would say probably I'd be dead, right? That was the ancient world. People died young of reasons that they couldn't understand, microbiology, none of this stuff. They didn't know about it. So that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing here an apologetic, an explanation for why nothing's happening. And the book of Acts, the last part is the book of Acts called the Acts of the Apostles. But what is it really? The book of Acts really is a bridge that moves from the Gospels, particularly Synoptic Gospels, and moves it over to the church that's being formed in Jerusalem under James. And Paul is lifted up. 2/3 of the book of Acts, the last 2/3 of the book of Acts, is about Paul. It's a new reality, a new way of viewing what the kingdom of heaven is. And that is what is reflected in Acts chapter 1, verse 6, 7, and 8, that whole opening part. So great question. If you have to know when a book in the Christian Bible was written in order to grasp what is the writer seeking to convey. Thank you. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה